Hi everyone, as you're just joining in, I'll give a few minutes or so to see if anyone is up this early on the West Coast to join in. My husband joined. For those of you who do not know who I am one of those few mystical people on the WAG staff who is actually not a coach. I actually do all the graphic design work for WAG right now, and I started about almost a year ago on the WAG team, and that's how I find the way that I contribute um, to working against gravity with all my information and knowledge is through all the design work. So if you see any infographics floating around either within the WAG group or on the website or in the knowledge base, more than likely I have probably touched it in one way or another. So that's who I am. And today I'm here to talk about my experience with certain food sensitivities and how I navigate around eating foods that don't include dairy, how I don't include eggs, and also other things like gluten. Soy is another one that I avoid as well. And then there's just a few things, but um, just being able to make a lot of those food choices. And it has been pretty easy because nowadays with so many foods that you find in like natural grocers or Trader Joe's or Whole Foods, like there's so many options available. And so I have a lot of different uh, things that I brought here on the counter to be able to show you guys. So I want to start off first by just talking about how I came about to deciding that I would not eat eggs or dairy, or I mean, I eat them now like occasionally. It's more of a eat more of other foods and less of eggs, less of dairy, mainly for a few reasons. One of them is I notice I get a lot more like bloated. I tend to fart a lot more. I get more like pimples or breakouts if I have dairy, or especially if I have soy. It was one thing that I noticed like years ago. I bought a coffee with soy milk, and then 2 or 3 days later, all of a sudden I get like pimples all over my face. And so just being able to notice different symptoms that happen when I eat certain foods, it's mainly why I choose to leave some things out. One of the big reasons was about a year and a half ago, I was trying to get my menstrual cycle back after having gotten off of birth control and after not having a lot of success with a conventional doctor because she did a bunch of lab tests and she said all my hormone levels were like in the average range or okay. And I knew something was kind of fishy because I was looking at them and they seemed kind of off. So I went to see a naturopathic doctor, and she decided to do a similar blood test for like, you know, hormones, thyroid, everything else, and noticed that I had super low estrogen, other things like that. But she also recommended that I take a food sensitivity test. And this is a test. She was able to do it being a naturopathic doctor, the company that I was able to do it for. I basically went to get blood pulled, get blood tests done, and ship it like via FedEx overnight to this company up in Washington. And what they test for is IgA and IgG. They're called immunoglobulin antibodies. And these are different proteins that your body makes in response to inflammation or infection, like if it senses that there's some kind of a threat to your body. So it's an IgA and an IgG antibody. And it's a little different than a food allergy, such as immediate reactions like a peanut allergy, or if some people are allergic to certain nuts or things like it's like not immediate. So these particular antibodies are more slower reactive, longer term, you may not see the inflammation or any like response for a few days or perhaps like a few weeks. And that might come in the form of either like skin breakouts. Maybe you might notice you're a little bit like bloated or gassy or puffier like a couple days later. For me, like one thing I'm trying to keep track of is I have like a rash on the back of my neck that will sometimes flare up here and there, and I'm trying to see whether or not that's food related or not. But my naturopathic doctor recommended that I take this food sensitivity test to see if there's any particular foods that might be causing this inflammatory response throughout my body. And as one way to like take measures towards figuring out how to get my menstrual cycle back. Like luckily I got it back like a year ago. I don't know if it was like related to this or just like a lot of things that I did. But I do want to show you guys what that actually looked like. And so this particular company, I was only able to get it through my naturopathic doctor. And I believe there's a place like Everlywell is a website or a company that does an at-home one where you can actually order it and then go somewhere to get blood pulled, or I think it's like a saliva test, and then you can send it in. But this one, this particular one I had to get through a licensed naturopathic doctor. So this is one of the charts here. And as you can see, the red means that my body will create a lot of these proteins, these antibodies in reaction to this certain food group. And supposedly, like over time, you can retest and your body may actually not create as many antibodies later on. I'm not 100% sure the validity of this for sure. I've been doing a mix of just like experimenting, trying different things out. But as you can see here, so this is one of the pages. It'll show like a whole bunch of different food groups. For some reason, I don't know why like mushrooms is like really high, but as you can see here, wheat, gluten is something that I'm very highly sensitive to. There's a few other like kind of odd ones that are like yellow and orange. And then here, so this is what was most surprising to me was, like dairy and then eggs. This is like huge, which is, I mean, I was eating eggs for like 2 or 3 in an omelet almost every day for like 5 or 6 years. So it was a bit surprising to me to see that the results that I got I might be sensitive to dairy or eggs. So I was like, well, let's take them out and see what my body does for a little bit and whether or not I notice any changes. And the cool thing about being on WAG and tracking your macros and being super consistent is that you develop this consistency over seeing what you eat across time. And a lot of times that might mean you're preparing the same meals, you're eating the same foods, and you can do a lot more experimentation with noticing what changes there are when you decide to introduce certain foods or leave out certain foods. You have a lot of data because you're consistently tracking over time. And so I was able to see like if my body weight would fluctuate a lot more, if I held more water, or just like notice like other changes in my body, like if I tended to get a lot more gassy, for example, if I tended to break out and whatnot. And I do notice that when I have gluten or when I have dairy, it's not like a huge like run to the bathroom type of thing like some people will have if they have celiacs or Crohn's, but they're more mild. I will, like when I was doing weight cuts for weightlifting, I would hold on to a lot more water weight if I had bread or if I had cheese or something similar. So it's been a really fun process in the last year or so, finding and navigating around different foods. And so now I'm going to talk about how I approach that. So what are some things that I do now that I don't eat as many eggs, or I don't usually go for dairy or whey protein, for example. And the first question I always get is, what do you have for breakfast? Because with breakfast, it's like eggs and yogurt and dairy. I mean, everyone eats eggs for breakfast. Like, what are the options? And the first thing that I challenge you to think about is, what actually constitutes breakfast food? Like, does it have to be eggs? Does it have to be cereal? Does it have to be yogurt? You can literally make breakfast or any meal anything you want it to be. And one of the things that I found with not being able to have things like Greek yogurt or egg whites is having very high low-fat protein sources available. So one of my favorite things to do is make a vegetable breakfast hash with turkey sausage, and I make turkey sausage with ground turkey meat, and I form it into like burger patties with like breakfast sausage seasoning. So that's really good. And I usually just dice up some of that ground turkey with some vegetables like Brussels sprouts, carrots, sweet potatoes, onions, apples. I'll usually take more mild vegetables for breakfast rather than something like broccoli or asparagus, which can get really pungent. But just a lot more of those like mild vegetables. Squashes are really fun to have, like a breakfast hash with squash. A couple times I've had, so I can eat corn and polenta. So I've had shrimp and grits, and there's a really good recipe on the WAG website for shrimp and grits. That's really a really good breakfast food that you can make a ton of and meal prep. Other things I have, so I have gluten-free oats as well. I will eat gluten-free oatmeal, and I'll mix in some protein powder, and I'll talk about a couple of protein powders that I usually use because I don't have whey protein. And I'll have things like breakfast tacos, like tacos for breakfast, like why not? It's like really good. When I'm looking up recipes, one of the biggest things that I look for are things that are vegan. And I consider the way that I eat vegan plus meat, which is a way to think about it, because if you look at vegan recipes, they're not going to have dairy or eggs. So anytime you want to look up a bread to make, or some kind of like pancake recipe, or anything else, like if you look up vegan options, and then you can also throw in like gluten-free as a tag there, you'll find a lot of recipes that will eliminate eggs or dairy in their recipe. So let me go ahead and talk about a few different ways that I navigate dairy-free options. So the biggest one is protein powder. So a couple of my favorites. This is a really great one. It's collagen protein. I have both the vanilla and the regular. So I got these off of Amazon, and like Vital Proteins, there's a whole bunch of different collagen ones, but this one was like the most cheapest. Like, I'm usually a very frugal, like budget kind of person, and so this one tended to be like the most for like the amount of money. The unflavored one is really good to put into like when I'm making like protein cheeses. I like to make like a Parmesan cheese with ground up cashews. I'll throw in some like nutritional yeast and onion and garlic powder, and throw in some of this to up the protein content. Mainly because a lot of dairy-free and egg-free substitutions are really high in fat. Like, for example, so for yogurts, there's a couple that I really like. So this Kite Hill one, this is an almond. But the fats on it, so because it's not Greek yogurt, you know, it's like super high. It's like 10 grams of fat. I think there's, this is the Greek one. The non-Greek one has a little bit less. There's also like cashew yogurt. This one is Good Karma. This is flax yogurt. There's also, the highest protein ones are Daya and Ripple, and those are made from pea protein, so they're going to be really high in protein and a little bit less in fats. The downsides I found with those are they can have that very protein powder flavor to them, so that's just something you have to deal with. But like a lot of protein substitutes are really high in fat, so you'll have to find a way to downplay your fats in other places. So like not adding a lot of extra oils to things, or like using whole food sources of fats when possible, to make sure that if you don't have a lot of fat grams to play around with, then you can have some of these. So other things, so protein powders. So because I don't have whey protein and or like egg white protein, so I usually get grass-fed beef isolates. And so this is protein that's actually made from beef, but it doesn't even, I promise you, it doesn't even taste like beef at all. And both Equip and Julian Bakery are like two really good ones that are, I think they mix and blend fairly well. They're not as smooth as like whey proteins, but they'll mix pretty well. I usually take a bullet blender and I blend a lot of my protein shakes together instead of just a shaker bottle, which tends to break up the clumps a lot better. One of my favorite brands, and this is like super budget friendly, so True Nutrition. So these are custom blends, and if you go on their website, you can actually custom mix different kinds of protein. So oftentimes I'll get their grass-fed beef isolate, but I'll also mix in, like this is a blend of collagen protein and beef isolate. You can also mix in pea proteins. They have rice protein. They've got all different kinds of blends, and you can mix whatever percentage you want and also the flavor. To be honest, chocolate fudge brownie is the better flavor of all the ones that I've tried. It seems to be the most, like, the best tasting. This one's eggnog. I got it as a novelty. I don't really like it as much, but like the chocolate is probably one of the best ones. But this is a way that you can get your protein powder, and you can mix it in with like oatmeal smoothie bowls. I love smoothie bowls and using that with fruit and things like, you know, gluten-free oats or granola. But protein, this is a way that I usually get in my protein powder, is through either custom blends or grass-fed beef isolate or collagen protein. Going on to other dairy-free stuff. So I found Halo Top vegan ice cream is probably one of the better ice creams for the macros. And you can get that at Target if you're in the US. Like my Target for some reason has more dairy-free Halo Top than it does like regular Halo Top. So that's a really good one. I think like Arctic Freeze or Arctic Zero is another name of another brand. But there's a few different vegan ice creams out there and cheeses. So I'll make I think I mentioned earlier, I'll make like a Parmesan cheese. It's like cashew, like I'll grind up cashews and nutritional yeast. This is like a really good like cheese-ish substitute. And this is actually all protein too. So if you use nutritional yeast, it's all carbs and protein. There's no fat. And there's some other nut-based cheeses too, like Miyoko's is a rice protein nut. If you look in like the vegan food section, you'll find a lot of cheeses that kind of have more of a cream cheese kind of taste. Diet cheese is probably like the stretchiest one. Trader Joe's has a few too. But again, they do have that like fakey, like cheesy taste. So just it really depends on like how much you really want it. Moving on to egg-free substitutes. So I found this vegan ranch with avocado oil. So mayonnaise and stuff that has avocado oil in it is usually the way to go. So it's not made of eggs. So this is a really good ranch that I've been able to find. Other things as well. So if you're using an egg substitute in a recipe, usually flaxseed is the typical egg substitute. So you mix like a tablespoon of flaxseed with a couple tablespoons of water and then let it gel up, and that's usually used as a substitute in terms of eggs. Another thing that I haven't used or tried yet, but I want to, is the liquid from chickpeas called aquafaba. And this is what it looks like once you blend it up, but you can even take a mixer and do it. But it's supposed to foam up just like egg whites, and you can use it as like a substitute for eggs in a recipe to make things really thick and frothy. So you take literally the liquid from a can of chickpeas once you drain them, and if you whip it up for like 3 to 4 minutes until it gets really stiff, like egg white peaks, you can use that. So those are just a few. Oh yeah, one more is, oh, do I have it here? Gelatin protein. So if you use beef gelatin, let me see if I don't have it here. Okay, beef gelatin is a really good way for making something cold that you want to have a very like thick texture to it. So beef gelatin is different than like collagen in that it will actually gel up when it gets cold. And a lot of people like to use it in like brownies or cookies or things that are meant to congeal and hold together like puddings and whatnot. Lastly, this kind of goes back to dairy, but I usually make my own ice creams and things through with a blender. I'll blend like avocado, protein powder, milk together and make my own like popsicles and use these as ice cream. So those are just a few other things. So I think that's all I mostly had for ways that I navigate around dairy and eggs and just trying to, keep this to about 20 minutes or so. But there's supposed to be a infographic coming out pretty soon in a couple weeks, one that I made with a whole bunch of substitutes for dairy and just different brands, different like ice creams, cheeses, milk substitutes. There's a few recipes that are going to come out on our website as well for different like walnut cheeses and other things. So keep an eye out for that. And then if you're looking for protein sources, because when you eliminate eggs and dairy, like all of a sudden you lose a lot of those extra like low fat protein sources. So the vegan chart, the one that has vegan protein sources, is a really good one to look into that will have egg and dairy free options for protein. So I hope this is really helpful for a lot of you who are like, navigating around these foods for various reasons. If it's for like an allergy, maybe you might be doing like Whole30 or like other things. But like notice like if you have any symptoms or things, we have a chart on our WAG site. I think it's on the store where you can actually write down and keep track of your sensitivities across several days just to see if you notice any reactions with foods. It's like a food logging chart that you can find. But anyways, have a great Friday and I will see you around.